I'm your host, David Merrill from SteelSanctuary.com, and I've got Nick Farabaugh on for us today. Nick, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going well. Thanks for having me on.
Um, Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Nick was down at the Senior Bowl. He's got a lot of great draft stuff for us. But before we start the draft, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Russell Wilson stuff that's been going on. Dulac had a post that he thinks that Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson had a little bit of a argument that Arthur Smith didn't want him to change plays. And then Aditi came out and said that wasn't true. And then Jay Glazier came out recently and said the Steelers are not interested in bringing Russell Wilson back. Um, what's your take on all that? Do you buy any of the Dulac story, first of all?
I mean, I'm sure there maybe might be a little bit of truth to it, but he didn't strip him of complete control, and you can tell that because you go back and watch the Ravens game. You can see him canning calls at the line of scrimmage. You can see him
Yeah.
um, setting up blitz protections. I mean, that's basic stuff any quarterback should have the ability to do. So I don't know if he stripped him. Did he strip him of changing route stems? Did he strip him of changing routes? All that stuff can really be nuanced. So there's a lot of pre-snap play changes that you can make as a quarterback, but Russ clearly still had some freedom to do things. So I'm sure there's a little bit of truth. Maybe Arthur Smith said, "Hey, don't change routes anymore," or "Hey, you can't change the stems anymore." I mean, it's not working or whatever. But I don't really think that necessarily he was stripped of all freedom because clearly he's on tape pointing out protections and changing slides and
Okay. Yeah.
canning calls. And if you want to know why they actually ran the toss so much, that was their can call all year. So, every play kind of comes in and usually has two or three calls in it to where if you don't like this look, you can can the call. Well, the can call all year was the darn toss. So that is exactly what that was seen so often. But that is kind of what I think was happening was that he had that freedom, but maybe he didn't have all the nuanced freedom. But who knows?
Some people have speculated that this might have come from Russ's camp to kind of try to explain why he struggled so much at the end of the season. Um, he's been known to have quite a PR team. Let's just say that. I don't know how true that is, but you're right, when you look at some of the stuff he did obviously change play at the line of scrimmage. It makes you wonder, well, is this just Russ trying to protect himself from the disaster that was the last 5 games of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably part of it. Man, when a report like that comes out, you always got to ask who has things to gain from it.
Exactly.
Pretty clearly, Russ
Exactly.
does. Not only does it try and salvage Russ's kind of standing with the Steelers, but it also kind of says to teams, "Hey, he was maybe hamstrung by somebody." But I will say this: a lot of NFL teams were actually pretty impressed by what Arthur Smith did this year. Now, I wasn't, but in the NFL, his job this year with the Steelers was regarded as pretty good, and so I'm not sure that Russ saying this is going to do him many favors in the NFL. I think a lot of people respect what Arthur Smith did this year with what they viewed as a limited quarterback room, a young and kind of growing offensive line that had injuries, a wide receiver room that just was not good at all. And so all these things kind of came up, and there's respect for Arthur Smith in the NFL. So I really think Russ probably did plant this story, and so how much truth is there is you got to figure that out, right? Because why else would someone in the Steelers organization reveal this? Unless the reason you would reveal this if you were a member of the Steelers organization is either one, there's a staunch camp of Russ and there's a staunch camp of Justin in the organization. Well, I think there's a little bit of a split. I don't think it's like an all out war. I think many people um, are okay having Justin Fields be the starter. I think they're comfortable with the idea of Justin Fields as the starting quarterback next year, even if they recognize he's probably not the long term option. I think they're comfortable with it for a year. And so, yeah, I do think this probably came from Russ's side.
So what do you think about the Jay Glazer thing, where it seems like, and other people are kind of hopping on this now, that the Steelers don't really have any interest in bringing Russell Wilson back? Do you think that's actually factual, or do you think maybe that's a little bit of speculation?
I don't know if it's stone cold, but I will say this: I've heard that a lot of people weren't happy when that the Dulac report dropped, and there's a lot of people that The reason I say it came from Russ's camp because a lot of people came out and told me, and it was like it's not true, and it's kind of what happened. And so I'm not ready to staunchly declare that Russ is gone. I know we've seen that a few times over the last few days, um, but I do think that I've been long feeling that they've been swaying further and further away from him and more towards Justin Fields. And from what my Senior Bowl conversations and from what I've heard the last few days, yeah, I would say that. And listen, if you're doing the timeline, I mean, Russell Wilson's team puts that out. Mike Tomlin's best friends with Jay Glazer. It's
Yeah,
not connecting dots with that one.
yep.
So I do think it's less and less likely that Russ is coming back, not only because we've seen this and there's a hurdle now, but also Russ is just going to be more expensive, and he's going to be 36. He's kind of declining physically. There's definitely questions in the organization about how he's going to fit in Arthur Smith's offense, and I think they really like at least the fact that Justin Fields has upside to be something. Right? He probably won't be anything, but on the off chance he does become the next Baker Mayfield or Geno Smith, well, you at least have your answer. I don't think really Russ has the upside for that.
So it sounds like you feel like the Steelers are going to go with Justin Fields for 2025. I know they didn't spend hardly any time on quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl, right? They were kind of ignoring that position. Is Justin Fields a quarterback in 2025, or is it someone we're not thinking about yet?
Yeah, I do think that he is going to be the quarterback in 2025. That's my guess. I don't think he's going to break the bank. I think the ceiling of his uh, kind of market is probably around 15 million, but I think he'll probably even get less than that. I can definitely see him getting around 10. And if the Steelers want to sign him to a multi-year deal, I mean, I don't really think he's going to be against going for a 2-year, 22 million or something deal like that. Um, and so that's honestly very much where I kind of come in is this team's just comfortable with Justin because one, he kind of showed enough, I think, in his 6 game stretch that he's one of the top 30 quarterbacks in the NFL. So this is a starting quarterback
Yeah.
on some team, even if he's not a long term answer. And also, listen, this would be the first time in his career, like literally the first time in his career, he will have an offensive coordinator for more than 1 year. And I know that, we talk about uh, we really do talk about Arthur Smith, maybe not in a glowing light, but that does matter. You having some stability in the factor. Can Justin just take a leap just off comfortability? And if he does, then maybe you have a real chance here to get something out of Justin Fields. And so that's kind of the thought there. But if you kind of could build around him, I really do think the Steelers are going to be able to at least set up the next quarterback, which is probably going to be a trade up at 26 if Justin isn't the answer. And so that's going to be the thought process. But Justin Fields has upside at least that you can realize, as well as the lower cost, so you can sign right that'll. So let's say Russ's market might be 25. I mean, that's an extra 13, 14 million,
Yeah.
potentially an extra 10 million at the most or at the least. You might be able to sign another receiver, a defensive lineman, a cornerback, whatever with that. And so
Yeah.
it is significant when you're building a team around a quarterback and you want to surround them with the best ecosystem possible.
What is Russ's market outside of Pittsburgh? Because I can't think of a team. The Raiders have already kind of squashed that a little bit, and I think he's done
But
so much damage the last couple of years to his
I mean,
market. I
I'm
don't know.
sure there's a team out there. I mean, the Giants maybe would
Yeah.
would take a shot on him. The Titans would maybe take a shot on him. There's some teams that are going to be a little desperate for quarterback help this year. The Raiders do make sense just because they're probably out of the Shador Sanders Cam Ward range.
Yeah.
Um, so they are Russ reuniting with Pete Carroll. Okay, I can see it. Um, but I mean, the market for quarterbacks this year is just not going to be lush. Period. I mean, maybe the Jets is another one if Aaron Rodgers leaves, but it's just not really a lush market. The Titans can select one of the two guys up top.
Hmm.
Um, the Titans, I think, are going to do that actually. The Browns, that need a quarterback are stuck with Deshaun Watson's deal and also, again, in a position to select a rookie And if you're one of those teams and you don't want to spend a lot on the quarterback position and you want a veteran, just go sign Kirk Cousins for the minimum.
Yeah,
Like that's what I would do.
that exactly.
Um, and so I don't know. He's not going to have a lush market, but he might have one or two teams that are probably willing to give him something. I have always thought, even if the Steelers wanted to keep him, paying him $20 million a year is an overpay. I just don't think there's going to be a
Overpay.
lot of guys that
Yeah.
want that. But hey, Russ is 36. He's accomplished a lot in the league, so he can probably also pull the thread of, hey, I'll just retire. And I mean, that could be something he does.
Um, with all that you just said about Russ, I think it's important for the Steelers to sign Justin Fields before free agency hits, right? Because he becomes top three free agent quarterback, maybe the top free agent quarterback, depending on how you feel about Sam Darnold. Um, I think his market goes up significantly if he hits the free agency. What do you think about that?
Well, he's the only one on the market with legit starting experience that's young. He's a better option than Zach Wilson, who's the other
For
guy in
sure.
that mold. And so, yeah, he's kind of the interesting bridge guy this year. He could be the Baker Mayfield or the Sam Darnold or the Geno Smith of this group. Again, I don't know he's going to make a ton of money even on the open market, but he might reach that 15 or 16 or 17 a year.
Hmm.
But he would have to probably go to Las Vegas or go to the New York Jets or go to the New York Giants or
Hmm.
somewhere where, it's new staff, or it's an old staff that maybe hasn't shown a lot of ability to develop quarterbacks. So that's a tough fine line to walk for Justin Fields. This is a guy that I remember at the end of last year, he just talked about how he didn't want to learn another playbook. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, the Steelers have a clear in here. This is a guy that likes it in Pittsburgh, likes playing for Mike Tomlin, is loved in the locker room, and is just begging for an ounce of stability in his football career. And
Yep.
so, I mean, the Steelers should have this deal if they're smart. They should. This deal should be done before he hits the market.
Yeah.
Before that legal tampering period is done, Justin Fields should be locked up and done, and it should be your quarterback. To me, and then if you want to go out and get a veteran, like I don't know, a Jacoby Brissett, someone like that, Marcus Mariota, just someone to be a veteran backup in case he gets
Yeah.
hurt or whatever, go for it. But I just feel like Justin Fields is their best option for the reasons we outlined. He's the only guy
Yep.
that's young enough to have some upside. He literally wants to be back in Pittsburgh, and he's not going to break the bank. And so, I
Yeah.
think as
Perfect
long as
fit.
you have that Justin Fields is signed, and especially for 2 years, right? Because if he is signed for 2 seasons and he ends up being that breakout player, you have him for another year, and you
Yep.
can. So you're essentially getting an extra free bite at the apple. So, really makes a lot of sense to bring back Justin Fields to me. And if you let him hit the open market, it does open that up for a team to kind of go crazy and say, "Hey, we'll give you 20 million a year if you come here." And who knows what Justin Fields will do in that scenario.
All right, let's transition to the Senior Bowl. I mentioned earlier, it didn't seem like they spent much time on quarterbacks at all, right? I saw that you tweet that you're not crazy about Jackson Dart. I'm a little higher on him, I guess, than you are, but no interest in quarterbacks at all at the Senior Bowl, right? By the Steelers.
No, I don't really love this group. I don't know. I don't like Jackson Dart for the sole fact that he's going to have a pretty big transition to the NFL, and I think
Yeah.
that's being undersold. He has average tools. He can run, but it's not. He's not a blazer. He's got an average arm. He is going to be 22, so he's young enough. But I mean, this is probably a 2-year project. He's never played under center. He was basically in a one-read offense that made things very easy for him in
Yeah.
Ole Miss. And anytime he was really asked to do NFL reads, didn't go very good. Um, his accuracy is spotty, so you're going to have to kind of rework the technical base. He could be a good player. He just has to go to a place that is willing to let him sit. And I feel the very same way about Jalen Milroe, who, again, Milroe has better tools than Dart, um, but he also is going to have to sit for
He
2
struggled,
years.
right? He
Right.
struggled quite a bit at the Senior
He
Bowl,
did
right?
struggle quite a bit. Very similar to the week Malik Willis had down
Yeah.
there.
It's actually a
And
pretty
I
good
mean,
call.
that is what it is. Malik Willis sat for 2 years, and I think this year actually kind of started to show a little
Hmm.
bit of growth. And so, if I were a team like the Los Angeles Rams, who maybe only has 2 years of Matthew Stafford left, I'd be all over the Dart Milroe group. If I'm the Steelers, who would be tempted to play that rookie this year or next year,
Yeah.
I would not be taking a toolsy guy that needs, this amount of seasoning this early in the draft. I'm all for taking tools, but I don't think spending a third round pick on what is probably going to be a low average dart throw is going to be a good use of resources when that pick could be a running back, a receiver, a corner, a D
Yeah.
lineman, whatever. So
It's
I would just build out this team around Justin Fields, and I would really kind of make that quarterback um, for 26 whenever you make the move, because I think everything has to be made in mind where we are looking probably at a deeper 2026 top of the quarterback class.
Yep.
Whenever you are going to go up and make a move for a quarterback, you want the best possible team for that guy, and so that would be what I would look towards when I'm making these moves. And so, I mean, there could be a late day name. I thought Tyler Shuck out of Louisville
I was going to
was
ask you about him.
interesting
He had a
for
pretty
like a
good.
sixth, seventh rounder,
Yep.
but
Yep.
the more I heard down there, the more he might go in the third or fourth, and that just is too rich for
Yeah.
my blood.
All
There's
these
really three
quarterbacks
guys
get
for
pushed
QB
up, right?
three. There's really three guys for QB3. It's Milrow, Dart, and Shuck is what it sounds like. And then there's the next tier where you have, Will Howard, Kyle McCord, different guys like that. But it's not great.
Yep. So I guess defensive lineman was the big focus for the Steelers down there. We saw Tomlin all over the defensive linemen. Anybody stick out for you in that group down at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, it's a really good defensive line group. Yeah, really, really good. So you look at it, and Walter Nolan is
Yeah,
maybe
that's the
the
guy, right?
top guy down there, I think. He's a three technique type. Kind of reminds me a lot of Ed Oliver. Super explosive. He has some things to work with. Still has to kind of figure out the rough parts of his game, but I really like him. I thought he was really good down there. Darius Alexander out of Toledo was awesome.
Heard a lot
Awesome
about
down
him, right?
there.
Yep.
He'll be 25 as a rookie. That's the one knock on him.
Mm.
That might keep him down from shooting up boards, but he's ready to go and be a contributor from the nose to the five. I love the versatility, the positional versatility he brings. Um, I thought TJ Sanders out of South Carolina. I didn't really know much about him before. He looked really good, and he's going to be only 21 in his rookie year. So that's a really interesting player to me. And you turn on the tape, and he's popping pads, and he's played anyone from 0 to 3. So I really like that. I know a lot of people will talk about Deion Walker. He had moments where it was just domination.
6'7", right? Big
Right.
dude.
Man, he's 6'7", 340, doesn't move like it, but there's some concerns there, I think. Plays with
Pad level and
incredibly
stuff.
high pad level and just gets
Yeah.
knocked off the ball too easily.
Yeah.
When I talked with him, he didn't view himself as a nose. He views himself as a 3 tech and a 5 tech more, which I think is not going to fly with most NFL teams. And I just don't love his fit at the nose because he plays with such high pad level. He's going to get moved out of gaps
Yeah,
more often.
6'7" nose is kind of crazy, right? I mean,
It is. It is. I mean, playing 6'7" on the line is just insane, but
yeah.
you can do it. It's just tough. And his motor isn't super hot. He's got a lot to. He feels like a very raw player, and I would probably pass on him. But there were some really good players down there. Other guys that kind of caught my eye. I really liked Omar Norman Lott, the Tennessee guy. He's on the opposite end of the spectrum. He's pretty undersized.
Yeah, like
So
6'1", right?
yeah,
I think I
and
saw.
so is Anais Peoples out of Virginia Tech.
Virginia.
He's
Yep.
6 feet tall. These are really explosive pass rushing 3 techs. I don't think the Steelers should shy away from pass rushing 3 techs. I know they want run defense out of their picks, but I don't think they should shy away from any type of defensive lineman just because they need depth. But there were a lot of good defensive linemen there, and that's not counting the guys that weren't there. You have guys like Kenneth Grant, you've
Yep.
guys like Tyreek Williams, you have guys like Derek Harmon, and even down the board, there's so many names. It's a really deep defensive line group, and so really good year to need one. They should be able to find 2 of them, honestly. If they want 2 of them in the top 4 rounds, I think it's very doable to find 2 different types. You could find a nose and a Cam Hayward-ish replacement. So whatever they want to do, I would not be surprised if they do that.
Running back's another deep position in this draft. I've heard some people say there's like 30 draftable backs in this draft this year. Anybody stick out at the Senior Bowl for you?
Yeah, they did. They did Jim Nagy, the Senior Bowl director, did say 30 draftable backs. I've heard 35 from some people.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Yep.
It is that deep of a class this year. I'm a little cooler on the late day 3 guys. I think after the early 5th round, it does experience a bit of a drop off,
Yep. But still,
I do think that this class, even being that deep to where you are going to have 20, 25 legitimate top 5 round backs, is exceedingly rare. Now, I do think the Steelers are going to look at speed more than they're going to look at anything.
I hope so, Nick.
I don't think they're going to look
hope
at,
so.
And I'll say this. I think even if, there have been reports floating around by Jerry Dulac saying that they want to bring Najee Harris back. Even if he's back, I think they'll draft one. I think they have to draft one. One, they're going to need a running back 3 in that case. Jalen Warren would potentially be on
Patterson's still on the roster, right?
Right. So I think they're going to draft a running back regardless of what happens with Najee Harris. So there are some guys that really stood out at the Senior Bowl to me. I really like Bashal Tutin out of Virginia Tech. If you're talking about speed,
I was
this
just
guy's
watching
a
him today.
one-cut go. Just hit the gas explosion. I mean, he is super explosive, perfect zone runner. Much better in pass pro than I thought. So I think there's some 3-down ability here. I thought going into it, he was just a zone running scat back. I think there's more potential here for 3-down potential than I thought. Devin Neal out of Kansas. I really like this guy's game. Just a solid player. Runs behind his pads, runs with patience, has instant start and stop explosiveness. I don't think he has the same long speed that Tutin has, but I also think the contact bounce paired with the short air explosiveness means he can pull off 30, 35, 40-yard chunks. He's not going to be your Jahmyr Gibbs, but he can surely give you some explosive plays. I really like him. I'm just not sure about the rest of the skill set. Doesn't really offer much as a receiver or as a pass protector, but I love the running style that he brings. I really like Damian Martinez. I know people don't have kind of cooled on him when he transferred from Oregon State to Miami. He's an uber productive player in college. But he's just a solid player, really good pass protector. He's not a game breaker. He's just a guy that's going to kind of give you the hidden yards, the tough yards. But he has more short air explosiveness than a guy like Najee Harris, so he can turn those gains that could be 5 yards into 15 or 20. Just a really solid back that does a lot of things well. I like Marcus Yarns out of Delaware. Really good receiver. Can absolutely hit the gas. He can fly. And so those were the 4 guys I thought that really stood out. Now, there were a lot of guys down there. There were guys like Ollie Gordon, Donovan Edwards, Rashard Smith. And I'm lower for the Steelers on some of those guys just because the skill set. Ollie Gordon feels too much like Najee Harris.
Yeah, there's been a lot of comps
as a receiver first. I think, with Jalen Warren, that's a little redundant to me personally. Yep. And then, a guy like Donovan Edwards, I just don't think is flashy around the edges. But I do like, Tutin is one of my favorite fits with the Steelers in this class period. I really like Devin Neal's fit and Arthur Smith's scheme as well. And so this is just a really solid group. Generally speaking, and that's without saying, there's a lot of other running backs in this class that I think.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Their skill sets really well with the Steelers.
The Marion Hampton, the Dylan Sampson, the guys like that. There's a lot of good running back. Caleb Johnson. This is a deep running back class. Anybody outside the Senior Bowl you like?
Yeah, I do like Caleb Johnson a lot from Iowa. I think he's the best zone runner in the class. I think the Steelers, if he gets to 52, I would really think about it with him. Mm-hmm. I know maybe people wouldn't be enthused by a second-round running back, but I think he's that good. So I would definitely think about it there with him. I'm a little lower on Sampson. I don't love the vision. Tennessee's offense is tough to kind of project for running backs too, with the wide splits. And you can see the vision issues. I know he has the speed, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think if you're going to go with speed, you go with a guy like Travion Henderson. Out of Ohio State. I really like his fit with the Steelers. Another guy at the Senior Bowl, RJ Harvey. He's kind of a small dude. He's like 5'7", but he's built like he's 210. He's like 5'7", 210. Wow. He's like a little
really?
He can fly.
Jeez.
It's instantaneous speed. When he hits the ground running, he is gone. So he's a real fun player too. There's just so many guys in this crop. Obviously, Cam Scadaboo, I think, is another player.
What do you think about him?
I really do like him. I think for the Steelers, I don't know how Jalen Warren-y they want to get with next player. I do think Scadaboo is very much in the mold of a Jalen Warren-ish player. He has really good contact balance.
Yep.
He just bounces off guys. It's one of those uncanny things where you just see him. Like it's like Ashton Jeanty, right? Where you see Ashton Jeanty, just like guys just like slip off him. It's like he's wearing like oil or something. Scadaboo is just like ricocheting off guys. How Jalen Warren does, where Jalen Warren's like a bowling ball and no one can get him down at his best. Scadaboo looks like that too.
He was so impressive in that playoff game.
I think Scadaboo is a much better pass protector and receiver than people give him credit for. And in the open field, maybe he doesn't have elite speed. I don't think Jalen Warren has elite speed either. Scadaboo's probably going to run like a 4.55.
Yeah.
He's a really solid player. If he goes in the third round, I mean, you got to think about it. He's a good fit for them too. So I do like Cam Scadaboo.
All right, let's talk the most important one, wide receivers. I know the Senior Bowl wasn't super impressive with wide receivers. Anybody stick out for you there?
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 guys that stuck out. Jack Besh out of TCU stuck out to me. I love his game. He is just such a quality football player. And when you look at what he does, he is a former tight end converted to receiver. Really only played tight end because that was the year where LSU had Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. and all
guys,
these freaks.
Superstars.
So they've had to find a way to get Besh on the field, and it was a tight end. But he's really only 220 pounds, so that's not really a consideration. But he's a real hoss of a blocker. He's a high-effort football player. He gets in and out of breaks. He's probably not going to run. He might run 4.6. I mean, he's not going to be a burner if that's what you want, but he's got great hands. He's super subtle in his movements. He's really able to separate through route running and nuance. And I think he has enough explosiveness in and out of the short area stuff. I think the 40 time might not be great, but I wouldn't be surprised if the vertical and the short shuttle and the agilities are good. He's a pretty underrated athlete in the short area stuff, which is what matters when you're talking about that for the most part. And so he's going to be a really good player. He's going to get Puka Nacua comps the entire process. While I'm not sure I would rise to the Nacua area, I do think that he is in the vein of a player like him. I like Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, both Iowa State guys. Higgins is a 6'4", 210-pound guy, but way too much fluidity for that size. It's insane that he has that much fluidity for that size. Noel is just a really good ball tracker. The other guy that I was really impressed by that I did not expect to be impressed by because I really hadn't watched last year. I'd watched Besh and some of the other guys, but Ty Felton out of Maryland.
I was going to ask you about him. I'm glad you brought him up.
Right, he's an interesting football player. Obviously, there's the Tallman connection. He'd play with Dino, and Mike knows him. So if you're ever putting that on the Steelers' radar, that is one thing to look at. This guy is like an incredible ball tracker. There were some awful throws that he made look good just by adjusting to them. He's got really good hands. I think he's going to run 4.3s. He can absolutely fly down the field.
Give me some of that, please.
I love his fit with Art Smith's offense. Whether it's Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, I love his fit to be that deep ball guy. And so I think people are going to kind of open their eyes to Ty Felton. I also did like Tej Johnson's week. I just don't think he's a fit for the Steelers given what they have with Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin. But if you're another wide receiver need team, I'd be in on Tej Johnson too. But Ty Felton to me was the surprise of the week. Did not expect that. I think he's a day 2 talent. I think he's a really solid player.
So you think he's day 2, like second, third roundish type?
Yeah, I think he came in, on the fringe 3-4. I think he's probably comfortably in that third round. So yeah, I think around there.
We know the Steelers need a wide receiver bad. Is there anybody outside the Senior Bowl that catches your eye? I know it's kind of a drop off, right? There's a couple of good guys up top, and then after that, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of all the top 4 guys. I think that's the good news. If the Steelers want a first-round receiver, there are guys. I like Tedero McMillan. I like Luther Burden. I like Matthew Golden. I like Emeka Egbuka. I think all 4 of those guys are legit players. I think
Egbuka screams Steelers, right? Blocking, good receiver, good guy. It's such a easy fit to make.
Egbuka's such an easy fit, and Golden is very similar. High character, a little different from Egbuka, but very similar reviews. You hear Egbuka and Golden talked about, and I think they're some of the guys with the highest character reports in the entire class. So, Teams absolutely love those guys from a character perspective, and their talent on the field shines too. I wish we got to see Savion Williams, the other TCU guy here
He's
down
interesting,
in
right?
Mobile. He opted out the last minute. I really am interested in his game. He's 6'5", but kind of blurs the lines. A lot of Cordero Patterson in his game, I think. But
That's
nowadays, a young
interesting.
Cordero Patterson is basically a Debo Samuel type, which is
Yep.
interesting.
Yep.
He's 6'5", so it's kind of weird, right?
And he
Ella
runs good too, right?
Diamonor out of Stanford is an interesting player. He didn't have the season he wanted, but again, has that kind of fluidity for his size that you don't really expect. So there are definitely some interesting players. Even at the Shrine Bowl, if you were watching that, I thought there were a few guys down there that had some nice weeks. Guys like Kanate Mumfield, and outside of that, so there are some players. It's just not as deep. There's just not as many names this year. But the good news for the Steelers is if they want to go first round receiver, I do think there are names for them to do that with. They're not going to have a shot at Tedero McMillan, but there is a
No.
definite shot. They're going to have a shot at Luther Burden, Emeka Egbuka, or Matthew Golden. Probably two of those names will be on the board for them. So it depends on where they kind of fall, but I do think the Steelers are going to have a shot at a first-round receiver if they want one.
All right. The other position of need for the Steelers, probably cornerback, right? What would the cornerback room look like at the Senior Bowl?
I really like the corner room. Now they didn't pay a really lick of attention to it, which kind of sucks to me because I do like some of the guys there, but Azarie Thomas I think is
Yep.
a really solid player. I really like him. He is a just kind of lengthy, explosive, ball aware corner. He's only 20. I love that fact. He is a young player. And more importantly, he is only getting better. I saw him get better throughout the 3 days of practice, kind of learning tricks of the trade, seeing tendencies. Really smart player. He's a press man outside guy. He fits what the Steelers like. Like if they want to go with the Corey Trice, Joey Porter Jr. type, he is a really good player. I just don't know where he's going to fall. I've seen anywhere from the second round to the first round for him.
Yeah.
If he gets to 52, I would definitely think about it. There's a ton of good corners, though, in the slot area. I love Quincy Riley out of Louisville. I thought he had a great week.
I like
Really
him too.
man-aware player. He can play inside or outside. Upton Stout out of Western Kentucky kind of came out of nowhere. He was probably a seventh rounder and probably rose to early day 3. He
I
is a
saw you
great
liked
man
him, right?
coverage slot defender, man. He is feisty. He's got ball production all over his tape. There are a lot of good corners that were down at the Senior Bowl. And so, those are just 3 names. But even other than that, Jacob Parrish out of Kansas State had a good week, and he's a slot guy probably. You look at others down that weren't even down there. Guys like Siobhan Revel and Benjamin Morrison and guys like that. I mean, they stick out as players too. It's a really deep corner class. I don't think people are giving that corner group enough love. I could even think Mac McWilliams out of UCF had a really good week down there. I thought he was the guy that kind of came on. Darian Porter, Dorian Strong, both those guys are probably press man guys on the outside. So there's Maxwell Harrison out of Kentucky, only practiced 2 days. He got hurt on the second day, unfortunately, but he's probably a second rounder, did a lot of favors for himself in those 2 days. Just a lot of really good players, man, on this corner class and at the Senior Bowl specifically. So I really like them. I anticipate they will take a bite of the apple at corner this year.
They almost
I
have
think
to,
they should
right?
maybe double dip with how many
Yeah,
day
I
3
agree.
picks they have, but we'll see.
I agree. I mean, outside of Joey Porter Jr., they don't really have anything in that room. Dante Jackson's a free agent. I don't know if they bring him back. You got Corey Trice. They need. I would absolutely love if they double dipped at corner at this point. Is there a position that I didn't bring up that you think? I keep telling the guys tight end is a low key possibility. I don't know if you agree with that. I watched Tyler Warren closely, and I just fell in love with that guy. He's phenomenal. He's probably not going to be there at 21, but
I don't
he's
think
a
they
great.
would take him anyways if he was there. I just don't. They're
You
not
don't
going
think
to take
so?
a tight end.
I know it.
Now they might take a late tight end, but not him in the first round. I think the surprise position that might get people a little surprised is guard. I think that they might draft a guard earlier than people think.
Hmm.
And it makes sense. Sayamalo's going into the last year of his deal. He's going to
Hmm.
be 32 at the end of that deal. The guard market has just exploded on the free agency market.
Yeah, it sure has.
And so it's kind of a gray area there, and they need depth on the interior. Nate Herbig's a free agent. So they need guys in the interior of the line. And I do think, they love succession drafting. The Steelers haven't built their roster up to that point yet, but Howie Roseman, I'm sure, taught Andy Weidel the importance of succession drafting because they do
Hmm.
it all the time in Philadelphia. The Steelers did that last year with McCormick. Obviously, he was thrust into action a little earlier than they probably thought because Daniels tore Achilles. But um, really, I do expect guard to potentially be a sleeper kind of need for this team. And I'm not sure next year they want to fill guard and tackle because I do think tackle is going to be a need for them next year just because I don't think Broderick Jones is going to end up being the guy.
Really?
So they're going to need somebody eventually there. But I don't necessarily think they want to fix two spots next year because I talked about that ecosystem of they want this quarterback coming in to have the best shot. They don't want an
Yep.
offensive line that's going to get this guy killed
Yep.
year one. So I think, a guard earlier than people think would not shock me. And that's also why I expect them to be a little more active in free agency this year. Try to maybe notch a few of those needs off the board. And, have the flexibility to go out and get a guard in the top 4 rounds would not stun me.
They need a veteran swing tackle on this team for 2025, right? You can't expect everything to go perfectly and Fuatano come back great from his injury and Broderick Jones be capable. If he's, they need to spend some money on a veteran swing tackle at this point, right?
They do. I mean, they need a veteran swingman on the interior too.
Yep.
They don't
They
have
need
one.
both.
So
You're right.
they're going to need to spend some money on the depth on the offensive line for sure. But I think they're going to spend a draft pick at some point on probably the interior. I think at tackle they'll either look to draft next year or they'll sign somebody. But I do think that guard is the sneaky need this year. I also think maybe not enough people are mocking them as safety. They need one. They need a third safety somewhere. Ryan Watts had neck surgery, so that's unfortunately probably out the window. They had their top three, obviously, in Minka, Deshaun Elliott, and Miles Killebrew, but they want to play their three safety nickel. They need someone. That could be a free agency signing, too. But I don't expect KZ to be back. So a younger option there. If you're looking at nickel types, I think, having that third safety be a nickel capable player is an interesting route that
Hmm.
maybe not enough people are talking about. So keep safety on your radars too. If they don't want to go with the pure corner and instead want to go with the safety nickel type, I think that's a possible drafting too.
So do you think the Steelers' first round pick was at Mobile this year, or do you think that I know it wasn't the greatest class in the world this year,
Yeah,
right?
I don't think it was. I think if there is, I mean, it's very clearly obvious if the first round pick was there, it was Walter Nolan out of Ole
Nolan, yeah.
Miss.
Agreed.
And I'm not even sure I could think of a guy that's other close. Like if Rosario Thomas is a first round pick, I love the guy's game. I just don't see them taking a corner in the first round, um, where things stand with the needs on their team. Um, so no, I don't. I do think that defensive line and receiver are easily the top two likelihood positions for that pick. And hey, I was kind of breaking this down, and I'm not sure. I think defensive line is probably the likeliest position, but I'm not sure there's a single more player more likely to be picked than Emeka Egbuka, if that makes sense.
I agree.
Then second, you can probably throw in like Kenneth Grant or someone like that. But the Steelers are in a spot where I think they're going to look at those two positions, defensive line, wide receiver. But yeah, I think, that first round pick probably wasn't here in Mobile this year.
If you had a choice between Ibuka and Golden, who would you go with?
I really like Golden.
I
I
do
really
too.
do. I love
I do too.
Golden's ability to run routes. I love his ability to separate. He can run every route in the book. He's more of an outside type, which is what I view the Steelers as needing more. Um, he is just a really fun football player. He is a complete receiver, and he did his best work against top competition. So, sorry.
Pleasure.
Thank you. But I would take Matthew Golden personally. I really love his game as an all around player. And he's a high effort player, too. I think that's the thing. He's only 21 years old. He's super competitive at the catch point, great speed. He's had some injury issues, which is kind of the one thing, and he has some play strength concerns. So I think he brings the effort in blocking, but I don't think he's going to be a great blocker. But I do think he's a really fun player. So yeah, I do like Matthew Golden.
I agree with you. Before we let you go, anyone you caught Tomlin talking to that hasn't been overly reported, anything, or maybe Andy Weidel or somebody like that kind of pulled aside at some point that we should know about?
So there's a guy out of UCLA that I thought was just the star of the week that I had no idea about. His name's Femi Oladejo. And he was an off ball linebacker this year, but then injuries forced him to play the edge.
Edge, right?
But
Yep.
he plays edge. He plays over the A gap. He can play over the B gap. Now he's a stand up spinner, so he's not going to put his hand in the ground. But there were reps where he put his hand in the ground on three tech. He is a fun player. He was dominating guys all week.
Huh.
Really fun player. So I really have no idea where he would be put at in the Steelers scheme. He would kind of just be this rover that I guess you could play outside, inside, wherever, and he's completely comfortable doing it. He's super quick. He's super explosive. He's got great moves. He's got a pass rush plan from the interior and the outside. He's probably a guy. I saw Mike Tomlin talking to him before the day two of practices for a very long time because he had an incredibly impressive day one, and then he just had incredibly stacking day one, day two, day three. I thought he was very impressive. So that's a guy to keep an eye on. I think he's a sleeper option for them, maybe in round 4, just because he's versatile. But if they draft him, he'll probably be announced as an edge, but this guy is not a pure edge. He is a awesome player. And you turn on the tape too, and he's an off-ball linebacker, lined up 10 yards over the slot. And then the next play, he's got his hand in the ground at three tech.
That's
It's kind
insane.
of wild. You don't see many players like that, but
I'm gonna have to
he's a
go and
fun
take a look
player.
at him. Awesome. That's a great thing for us to know about, Nick. We appreciate it. Any last thoughts before we get out of here? Anything going? Steelers in Ireland is almost a done deal, right? At this point, kind of tired of hearing about it. Let's just announce it and move on.
Yeah, I think, that is definitely going to be part of, this season is going to be interesting to see where they place it. I think late September is probably where they're going to be
Yeah,
at.
they said week 4, right? Which
Yeah.
means a bye after, and that's a long stretch of games in a
I'm
row,
not so
right?
sure they're going to get a bye.
You don't think so?
I don't necessarily think they're going to get a bye after that. So,
Okay.
I mean, it's not like they're traveling.
Yeah, it's probably
That
6 hours,
far.
right?
I
6,
mean,
7 hour flight.
Dublin to Ireland is a 6 to 7 hour flight. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an hour more than what they will do when they fly to LA. So,
Sure, that's a good point. That's a good point.
I don't think it's going to kill them in that regard. So I do think that they might get a bye, but I don't really expect it. But we'll see. It's interesting placement in the schedule. But hey, I think this is the first time, probably of many times, they're going to end up being in Ireland. I do
Yeah.
think when 2027 rolls around, I don't think they're going to go to Ireland. I think they're probably going to go to Mexico.
Yep.
Um,
That's another one.
that's
Yep.
where they were probably going to go this year if Estadio Azteca was ready. It's not. It's still being renovated for the 2026 World Cup. And so I do expect the Steelers to probably go to Mexico in 27 or 29, one of those games. They might even go as the road team. They don't play the Cowboys probably until 2028, but
That would be an
they
interesting
could
game
play
in
the
Mexico.
Cowboys next year because they will play an NFC East team as their 17th game. So I
Hmm.
mean, they could go on the road to Mexico. Dallas, Dallas in Mexico is about as slam dunk as you can get from a Mexican fan base
Oh yeah.
perspective.
Oh yeah, for
Um,
sure.
the only thing maybe more slam dunk would be like 49ers, Steelers, but so yeah, I do expect the Steelers to go there at some point. But internationally, the Steelers went 12 years without going international. That ain't happening again. They're going to probably be
Yeah.
they're going to be international at some point before the end of the decade again. They're going to go to Ireland next year, but they're either going to be Mexico, back in Ireland. They have international marketing rights in Germany. I mean, hey, they could be thrown to Brazil or Australia. You never know.
Yeah.
That is a
Oof.
possibility every single time the schedules come out because sometimes the Packers probably didn't expect to go to Brazil last year, and they did. So it's always
Yep.
possible the Steelers could end up going somewhere too.
Australia is a crazy road trip, man. That's a long way to go. They're gonna do an Australia game this year, right? If I'm
Yeah, they're doing one in Melbourne.
Yeah, that's insane.
It's
That's
a
crazy.
long flight. That
That's like
flight is
20 hours or
long.
something,
I
right?
mean, so the
God
Rams are
damn.
playing there. And I mean, if you're
Is that
doing LA to Melbourne as a flight, I still think that's like 16 hours.
Yeah.
Like, it's a long flight, man. It's a long flight.
That's definitely a buy after that, right? There's no doubt.
Oh,
You
no
need
chance there's
a
not.
couple weeks to recover from that. Holy crap.
Yeah, man.
I don't. That's wild to me. All right, Nick, I appreciate you coming on. You can find Nick at Farabaugh FB on X. You're working for Penn Live. If you don't know Nick by now, you're missing it. So check him out and all his stuff. We really appreciate you coming on the Steel Sanctuary podcast, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Always good to come on.
All right.
Talk stuff.
Thanks a lot.
What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to chase after them?
Maybe I'll go to the movies by myself.
Oh. It's just what they'll be expecting us to do.
You should be terrified.
Okay, are you making some of those up?
Nope, they're all real. Probably worth the Google.